How you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world, Option Training Academy. So I want to bring you a special show today. This is something that we normally don't do. And I wanted to talk about this because what I want to kind of try to do with this particular channel is bring you stories and ideas and perspectives that you normally wouldn't get in the mainstream, because it's really not something that a lot of people like to talk about. It's kind of like a sub-segment of our population. And what we're going to talk about today is the power of West Indian carnival culture. I got somebody on here that really understands this culture, can give you a better understanding of it. You can understand it from a cultural standpoint. You can understand it from a business standpoint. You can also understand why it's so big in this particular part of the world, why it's growing. And maybe it's something that you maybe want to get involved in and start developing relationships to try to figure out how you can add value to these situations and maybe create something beneficial between your group and their group. So I got my good friend on, an associate, somebody I've known for a very long period of time, J.R. Bell. Bell, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Diamond Dave?
Going on good. I appreciate you coming through, man. I know you're busy. I know you jet setting all over the world doing what you got to do, but I appreciate you taking the time to come through. So let's talk about this power of Western carnival culture, because really quickly, I'm gonna give the audience a little bit of background on me, and then we're gonna kind of go into you. So the goal of this particular broadcast is to give people a better understanding of carnival culture. And how I found out about it is because I'm from West Orlando, and there's a lot of West Indians in West Orlando. They kind of started moving into that particular part of the city. I want to say maybe the mid 80s. And then you started getting kind of exposed to carnival culture. And for a lot of people in the South, it's not something that they really exposed to if they weren't raised around these type of people. And so it's something that was always very interesting to me, but I didn't necessarily always understand it, but it was always something that was always going on. One thing about Atlanta was they have a lot of festivals, they have a lot of West Indian events. So there's always something going on based around West Indian culture. But one thing I noticed is when I would meet people from other parts of the country, they necessarily didn't really understand what was going on. And so when I was able to link up with you when I moved to Tampa, and I seen that you was heavily involved in the culture, okay, it says this is somebody that gets it, and you were always involved in it. So even though it's not something I may specifically involve myself in, I always appreciate the culture. So really quickly, I want to ask you, right? What's your cultural background and kind of give the audience a little bit of understanding of where you're from?
All right. Well, for starters, my cultural background is actually Bahamian. My family, comes from the Bahamas, Nassau. Coming from Nassau over to Key West, and from Key West up to Miami, and spread all over through Florida. And so that pretty much like comes from my mother's side of the family. And I was born in Tampa, early 1980s. Pretty much have been part of Tampa over 20 years off and on. And I pretty much like got into the carnival culture pretty much within the late 90s, early 2000s. Whether it was, in different parts of Florida or, elsewhere. So kind of like how I got pretty much into the carnival culture was when I was at the University of South Florida in Tampa. I was involved with the Caribbean Cultural Exchange, or CCE, at first. And with that, they kind of like developed into going to various events, Caribbean themed events, and it eventually ended up being like going to carnivals, whether it would be like in the city or in Orlando or Miami or something like that. So after being part of that, I eventually met up with people that were directly involved with carnivals that were in the Tampa Bay area. First, the carnival that was located in St. Petersburg used to have a annual carnival in St. Petersburg, and then there was, of course, a annual carnival in Tampa. And so, with the one in Tampa, I got involved with the president of the nonprofit organization there for Tampa Caribbean Festival Incorporated, Mr. Anthony Devin George, and that was, and it was almost like 15 years ago. And ever since then, I have been one way or another a part of the Tampa Caribbean Festival, which kind of like organizes the carnival that is located in Tampa each year. But I have been involved in other carnivals like within Orlando, Miami, Washington D.C., to a certain extent New York, and elsewhere. So that's kind of like real quickly like how I got into the carnival culture.
So let me ask you, what about carnival when you was in Tampa made you even want to get involved in it?
It was more of me being part of or seeing Carnival over in Miami. Miami Carnival is probably one of the more established carnivals in North America, and has been in existence for what has it been like over 30 years, probably like 35 years or so.
Okay.
And later on down the line, the one in Tampa pretty much like started up. And, me, getting in contact with the president there, Anthony Devin George, who's part of a, Trinidadian family group of artists. You have him, you have Naya George, and you have our George. It's pretty much the three notable artists or soca artists, as they say in soca music, that people know about in the Caribbean culture. So for him, he wanted to just have that Caribbean Carnival experience, be part of Tampa, which is where he had been resided for a number of years up to this day. So he pretty much like said that, hey, I mean, you have this Caribbean background, but also technical background to do things as far as like doing websites, marketing, and that type of thing. And so I pretty much got involved in that and have been involved in that ever since, from that particular, for that particular aspect of the business of Carnival. But like actual Carnival culture, it's more of like me being associated with, multiple people from multiple countries around the Caribbean.
Okay. And so can you give the audience some background on how Carnival started if it's not something that they're familiar with?
Okay. So the Carnival pretty much itself, started kind of like in the late 18th century, because there was like, at a point where, of course, you had the whole thing with slavery, things like that. And, plantation owners, I can't say the word for, what you usually call them. But what they were doing was they were, kind of like, constructing or organizing masquerade balls, basically.
Okay.
People know about the term masquerade ball.
Okay.
So that's kind of like a formal type of event, a formal ball. You dress in black and white. You have like a little bit of a mask type of thing. If people have been to New Orleans, they know about those little mask things that they have there for New Orleans. But it's kind of like is a similar thing, but a much more formal type of thing. But and that was kind of like done around what they call Lent. But because the slaves couldn't really participate in that, they pretty much did everything. They did their own thing. They did their whole separate type of event. And at the time, then it was called Canbele, or which meant burnt cane in French, right? And that kind of like developed into what is now Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago. And with that, they also developed having constructed instruments, making instruments from drums and other things like that. And that's how they created the thing for steel pan. So they were able to construct all of these instruments that a lot of people see today pretty much came from the late 18th century up into this current time. So like for example with Trinidad, when they have their carnival, they have their traditional events, and one of the biggest events there is their panorama, which is a steel pan competition with multiple bands that have, it could have like 20 to 25 to 50, up to 50 different members that will be part of a steel pan band. And so you have that, and then also it also has what they call now Juve, or as they say, the break of day or break of dawn. Which they get up very early, and they had been pretty much celebrating in homemade costumes or pretty much whatever they had. And with that, they also douse themselves in oil or powder or mud while they dance to their own music, their native music, as it was calypso, which is like soul and multiple things that they were doing. So that's why, like today, you have all across the world, not just Carnival, but at times Juve, where it can't just sometimes it's not necessarily tied to the Carnival itself. Now you have Juves that could happen in different parts of the world at all times of the year, but it also ties into the whole Carnival culture that you see today.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. So let me ask you a question. So when a person goes to Carnival, what kind of experience are they looking for?
What they're looking for is it it kind of like goes into the whole history of Carnival in that it's like a sense of freedom,
Okay.
particularly if you go into Carnival or during the Carnival week, over in the Caribbean. For me, it's a whole different experience having a Carnival in the U.S. or maybe in Canada or something like that than having it over in the Caribbean, because it's almost like a whole different type of atmosphere. You don't have to deal with what's going on in America or in the States, or all the stuff that maybe you kind of like subconsciously think about in the States. It doesn't exist in the Caribbean to a
Okay.
certain extent. So it's almost like okay, here it's like I'm free. I'm I don't have to worry about nothing. So that's part of one thing with that. And I kind of like bring the Caribbean experience to as an example, because um with that, you don't really have that many restrictions as far as like doing events or having events or anything like that. So if something goes on until 4 a.m. or until 8 a.m., it can pretty much happen.
Okay.
Here in the States, you can't really do something like that unless if you have like an absolute private venue that you completely own and nobody can really touch you or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say that you're preparing yourself for being involved in various events for, like, say, up from like 5 to 7 days at the minimum. Depending on where you go, and that it ends with the actual kind of like carnival experience for some, but also there could be like the carnival days, and then after that they could have something for 1, 2, or 3 days after the actual carnival or the parade takes place.
Okay, okay. And let's go ahead and let me go ahead and we're gonna break down some of these pictures. You kind of give us some context to them. So let me
Mhm.
know if you can see that picture of that woman. Oh, my bad. I ain't even sharing it. My fault.
Yeah, there
Okay,
we
there
go.
we go. All right. So kind of give us some context of kind of like what these pictures are, what they represent.
Okay, so here, this is like a recent picture. I was over in St. Lucia for their St. Lucia Carnival in July, and
Okay.
this, here, this is what they call a frontline costume for one of the masquerade bands that are out there, in the streets in St. Lucia for their parade or their carnival parade, um, and this kind of like represents colorful, vibrant, um, flashy, to a certain extent, um, and also like kind of like showcasing the person wearing the costume, you
Okay.
know, so that they say, okay, this is me, expressing myself in all of my glory, so to speak, whatever it is, you know. Um, but it's kind of like goes into more of like the modern day carnival type things, because of course when it all started, you really didn't have this at all,
Yeah.
so to speak. It was kind of like it was way into like what I say after the 90s, where they started to have something like this as part of like their costume or uniform or something like that.
Okay. Let me go to this next picture. Okay. So you got these women here. So what is this? What give us some context of this?
Okay, so that is a moment where they are like on a stage, so to
Okay.
speak. Okay, um, and that is like where where I would say the most people like view the masquerade bands that are participating in the parade. It gives like the masquerade band or the mask band, as they say, their opportunity to showcase all of their, outfits, costumes, the people that are participating in the band to the public in that particular place, like here in St. Lucia, or it's Trinidad, or it could be Jamaica, or the Bahamas, or Grenada, or anywhere in the Caribbean. Also includes you also have one in the UK as well, Notting Hill Carnival that is coming up. And also there was one that did pass in Toronto. So Toronto is one of those that has a long-standing Caribbean. They have a very large Caribbean culture in Toronto, and they've had a parade caravana there for a very long time too. So like this right here in St. Lucia, kind of like shows like one section of a masquerade band showcasing their costumes, their colors, and what they have there for the public that are there in attendance to watch this parade.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, because and you may know this because you used to live in Tampa. So out of Buccaneer culture, we have what we call crews.
Yeah.
And it's like a group of people and they represent like one thing.
Yeah.
Is there something similar to that in Carnival culture?
Well, they have something like a section or like a band,
Okay.
So you can have like for example, you can have a section in the band that's led by, either a certain person or, someone that designs the costume or designs those costumes. And they could say, hey, you could join this section, be part of this section in the band, and you'll have all of this, this like I guess like a little package, while you're part of this section. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or it could just be the band altogether that has like a certain package, but you get something else by being part of a specific section within the band.
Okay, with the costumes, especially with the women, is there, when they're part of like a section, is there supposed to be a uniformity in the costumes? All the costumes supposed to have like a similar look?
Okay, yeah. So within a section, they would have like a similar look, but when you talk about the first couple of pictures that you posted on there, like that would be something of like a front line or like the women that would be in the front part of the masquerade band or the section.
Okay.
So you would have something where they would wear like, the large feathers and all of that, including the, pretty much like the bodysuit or whatever they have for their costume. So that would be like the front line. Midline, as they say, is something where it's kind of like a little bit scaled down a bit, but they'll still have like, some feathers here and there, something like that's on their legs or on their arms, or like in the back line, you really wouldn't have like that many feathers, if at all, but you would still have like the bodysuit, and it would still be in the same color scheme as everyone else that's in the front and midline.
Okay, and with the costumes, is there a company that you go to get the costumes made, or they get made from like a person? I forgot what you call it. Like a woman that sews.
Right. Yeah, it would be like a woman that sews. What they call them, like costume designers, right?
Okay.
So they would have costume designers that would like design the costumes. That costume designer may have a team with them, so that once they get into orders as far as like how many people that were going to be in the front line, how many are going to be in the midline, how many are going to be in the back line, so they would know like, okay, we need this amount for the front line, we need this amount for the midline, we need this amount for the back line. They place their orders as far as like what parts they need, what pieces they need. And once they get that delivered, then they could start making the costumes.
Okay.
And then after they make those costumes, then they say, okay, we're ready to distribute those, so that pretty much like around the week of Carnival, the people could come in and pick up their costumes. But that kind of like goes into the whole craziness of Carnival, because at the same time, you're trying to, make these events that, some people are like, oh man, I can't miss this event, I can't miss that event. But then you got to be like, oh, but I got to pick up this costume that's all the way on the other side of the, at the other side of the country or something like that.
Okay.
So it kind of like goes into the craziness of Carnival, but that's what makes a lot of people like love it, especially if you've been raised in the Caribbean culture, whether you're in the Caribbean or you're from the Caribbean now in the States.
Okay. So let's go to this picture right here. So can you give us some context of this one? It's a good shot.
That's more of like that would be like more of a frontline costume.
Okay.
Full feathers, in the back, pretty much like a backpack is what they call it. have like a little headpiece, and also stuff in the arms, and most likely, stuff in the legs as well. And I think that's like Zugo Carnival was, one of the masquerade bands in St. Lucia, Zugo Carnival. So that kind of like goes into more of, what they go through in the front line, because once they pick up the costume, they got to see if all the feathers are there, everything's right, if everything fits. If it doesn't fit, they got to go back to where they picked up the costume, see if they could make adjustments, or they make custom adjustments themselves. So like I said, it's part of the craziness of Carnival, but that's more of like the ladies side than men's side, because men, all we got to do is put a couple of arm bands on, leg bands, whatnot, put on some shorts and a t-shirt if you have a t-shirt, and we good. But with ladies, it's a whole different story, especially if you're if you're getting a frontline costume.
Okay, okay. And so let's go to this picture. Give us some context to it, please.
All right, that's more of a frontline costume. I think that's like another section of one other band there that was just for fun Carnival there in St. Lucia. So that goes into the whole thing about like having a frontline costume, but being part of a section within the band. So you would have frontline for that section, you could have frontline for another section, and then another frontline for a third or fourth section. In this particular case in St. Lucia, there was like one band that had up to, I would say, 11 sections within that band.
Okay.
So it's like you have a lot of costume designers designing a lot of stuff, that have to be done within a certain amount of time so that they'll be able to distribute it to all of these people. It could be from like 400 to 800 people at a time, depending on, how big the carnival is.
Okay, so let me ask you a question real quick before we go into the next shot.
Mhm.
When we're looking at these costumes, they look very, very elaborate. They good, they good costumes. They seem very elaborate. Based on the economic situation in some of our Caribbean islands, how do people afford these costumes year in, year out, along with everything else they got going on in their life?
Oh man, they sometimes they figure out a way. They figure
Okay.
out a way. Now in the modern day, of course, we have the whole thing with the economy and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That costs go up all across the board. And in these days, in the carnival culture, sometimes it gets even tougher to try to get these materials to design these costumes. So, with that being said, that reflects on the pricing that is put down on either those that want to be on the front line, midline, back line, or whatever it is.
Okay.
So the thing is like a lot of the people or the patrons pretty much have to plan out, one, if I'm going to this carnival to begin with, and two, if I'm going to be part of a band, and three, what section section I'm going to be in.
Okay.
If I'm going to do front line, I gotta make sure I got the arrangements to do front line. I got my hotel arrangements set up. I got my flight arrangements set up. All of that set up way ahead of time before it comes closer. Like I would say 2 months or 1 month before the carnival that they want to go to.